And then,
Okay, good.
okay, and so then I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I don't want to butcher her last name, so I will.
Opinsky.
So Larry
Perfect.
Opinsky, he is going to be presenting. He has a child with special needs, so he has a very unique perspective on, caring for a child. And so he, like all of us, is a great resource. So if someone that has the same commonality that doesn't understand what it's like to, have children with complex issues. So I will hand them up to him, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Nancy.
Can you hear me everything? Thumbs up. It's just now like 3 diploma coming in from after that Otis lunch. Thank you all for inviting me. Everyone gets the feedback here. I'm going to switch to the other.
Computers.
So my name is Larry Opinsky. Accountant, planner, insurance sales without and I'm a dad. My wife, I have 2 children. I'll show you a bunch of pictures in a minute. My oldest is 26, and he's global. And my next is 22. His name is Sam. Sam's neurotypical. Lily has RTT. So it's not DYRK1, but it is one of those orphan syndromes. It is a genetic disorder. And I've spent with my life, I spent the past 26 years, 24 years, learning about all different things. So, I grew up in the 80s. I'm old. Standards, especially my kids, I'm old. I went to always through school. I never saw anybody with a disability. Or if I did, I didn't really know about it because that's how life was in the 80s. And before he became a lot of really wonderful things that people have done. I went to college in New Orleans at Tulane University. I got out of college and got into family business. My dad started when I was in high school. We owned a shoe shack in South Missouri, so I made shoes. Went along with that. I went on a blind date. I grew up with a family. I knew her. Talked to everybody since. We just haven't been I'll tell her. I'll tell her that. I got a good 30 story for you. My daughter was born in '99, and we got full diagnosis in 2000. And then Sam was born in 2003. And at that point, I was still sort of in the throes of, hey, what is my life going to be like? And I took a class called Partners in Policy Making. So I come back to all of them. Show hands, anybody going to Partners in Policy Making? Really changed my life. But through the course of the time that we come, I do a couple different jobs. I stepped out of the street back to me. I volunteered 10,000 folks. Lily went to school, Sam went to school. I decided I can't run shoe factory anymore. My boyfriend was making a parent from begging it into that major USA wall that people weren't paying attention to. So finally I said, no more shoe factory. It really gave me my 2.0 career, which is just really really went on, we graduated, and so did her brother. High school, and to live on, she's 26 at. A couple highlights of the photos up there. Of course, you see the little ones. And, and here, I think of my daughter, I'm thinking of her either covered in cake from her like second birthday, or that middle picture, which is her and her brother actually in some Jewish. That's my daughter's box, and that was actually a significant piece of I think, but this sort of spanned the past 26 years. Bob in the middle there, that's COVID. She turned 21. COVID. And that was, remember the drive-through birthday parties, right? You came by on cars, the front lawn, that's what that was. And continue on, you see they get over and over. And this bottom right picture was just from last weekend, or 2 weekends ago. Our niece got married at a destination wedding in Block Island, Rhode Island, which was a whole thing to get to. So we all have to be there together. And it's long. And that's sort of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So, I grew up in the 80s, right? So, I grew up in the 80s, I knew nothing about of disability. I knew nothing about how that was going to affect me. So, again, school members are diagnosed today, and you got your diagnosis. Of course, right? We all, the diagnosis stage for me was a lot, like I'm sure it is in everybody. And you continued on with life for the first year or 2 or 3 years. And slowly realized that the world of disability had been around the whole time. I just didn't know it was there. And I give these analogies to go above the door. There were those that were in my house in my life. I never knew. And finally, when I decided, wait a second, well, this is going to be my life. I need to sort of open this door and see what's going on. I opened that, and I didn't realize that there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. But it was a whole world in it, even bigger than the world that I thought it had been there the whole time. And it was very empowering for me to understand that just because I went through that thing, and my family and I were going to basically live on the other side of that, or at least that's what I thought, right? That was going to be my entire life. And what I realized was the only thing that I could count on for sure was that things were going to change. Almost every day things were going to change. Whether it was the little things like what I wanted to eat that day, or what her health condition was that day, or anything else. How I reacted to things were going to change. Every day something was going to change. And I tried to figure out how to put it into words for me to understand as a dad. I'm sure going to be stereotypical here. You like to fix stuff, right? Really, very early on, I am not a geneticist. I'm not a doctor. I was not going to be able to go fix my daughter, any tool that I was going to figure out. But I did realize that I could probably make the world a little better place, and maybe that would be what I was about to say. Right here, anybody heard of what the Bible? Okay. There's a very good piece on this. Don't think a lot of play. I'm sure you will. Let's say. I had it laid so that I would potentially launch it. I used to read this. Can you just click on there?
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
Hello, my name is Emily Pearl Kingsley, and I wanted to share with you an essay which I wrote a long time ago to explain to people about the experience. Hello, my name is Emily Pearl Kingsley, and I wanted to share with you an essay which I wrote a long time ago to explain to people about the experience of raising a child with a disability. I have a son who is 46 years old now, believe it or not. And so this was distilled from years and years and years of experience and talking to many, many parents. So what I say is that when you're planning to have a baby and you're pregnant, and it's sort of like you're planning a wonderful, exciting vacation trip to Italy. And you make all your plans and you read a bunch of guidebooks and you study a few phrases in Italian. You're going to go see the Colosseum in Rome, and you're going to go see the Michelangelo David, or you're going to see the Sistine Chapel. It's very exciting. After your 9 months are up, you pack your little suitcase and you take off, and off you go. And after several hours, the plane lands and the flight attendant comes in and says to you, "Welcome to Holland." Holland? You say, Holland? What are you talking about, Holland? I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've planned to go. This trip is planned for Italy. Well, there's been a change of plan and the plane has landed in Holland, and that's where you have to stay. So there's, of course, an initial shock value, and you have to get a whole bunch of new books, and you have to learn a few phrases in a new language. You meet a whole lot of people who you would never otherwise have met. And you catch your breath and you wait a little while and you look around. And after you've been there for a while, you start to realize that, well, it's just a different place. It's not a horrible, disgusting place with pestilence and plague and famine. And, it's just different. And perhaps Holland is a little slower paced than Italy. Maybe it's a little less flashy than Italy. But after you're there for a while and you're used to it a little bit, you get to realize that Holland has tulips and Holland has windmills. You even run into a Rembrandt once in a while. And everybody you know is busy coming and going from Italy. And they're all bragging about what a fabulous time they're having in Italy. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yep, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. And the pain of that is always with you and will never, ever, 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 ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very considerable loss. But if you're too busy mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may not be available to enjoy and appreciate the different but potentially very lovely things there are about Holland.
So that's only not to understand that. Interesting. I'm going to go use there. That was my wife as a I go for the children's television workshop. She was one of the original lighters for many, many years on Sesame Street. And her son, who she showed us the first disability seat on Sesame Street way back in the days. This is the best thing that I have found to talk to not just people who have experienced it, but other people who ask me to talk with them in small groups, large groups, one-on-one, whatever, about what it's like, how to help people who are dealing with a permanent disability, a permanent situation. And it goes back to the diagnosis. When we got our diagnosis, the first thing we did is examine you guys. Our office was in Chicago. Why did we not show up at this conference? And we just right from the fire, heat and pan like were there. If you know anything about stuff that right swap. Dave will put out a presentation there that was, oh my gosh, special and so big. We first learned the concept, the difference between expressive language and receptive language. So her prolific, that's it. Her expressive language is middle. Lily is not verbal. Lily is not. Lily understands 100% of everything everybody says. She's right now. She's 26 in her head. She was 8 years old all the way through. kind of saw that, didn't see that. So it was something that whenever we would go with a teacher or a therapist, it explained that to. And we had to be, and this was the time when we realized we were becoming experts. And we understood the term that we still apply to this day. I know there's lots of different ages, more younger than older items. And that was really cool that you guys do that so you can see who each other is, even if you don't know each other. At school, presumed competence and in life, presumed competence is the way we approach everything that there are about. And I encourage you everyone to, just because my daughter can't show you exactly on a standardized test or a evaluation or speak it out loud in an appropriate time, does not mean she doesn't understand what you're saying and everything. And if you are age appropriate and you approach her and that with the confidence, will get 100%. And that's a big sort of dad kind of attitude recommendation I have for you all. The other thing that I got back then was big A advocacy and little A advocacy. I'm going to come back to that. Advocacy has two forms, right? There's what I call big A advocacy, and that's what you do that's going to help your family. You specifically, something as simple as, I want my bologna sliced today or this today. Or as simple as, hey, my kid deserves to be in this classroom with these other kids, even if you guys don't listen. That's what I would call big A's. If it benefits your mom, what? But actually is a place to benefit stuff that here in the state of Missouri, for instance, we had a big giant middle A advocacy event where our government was cutting Medicaid, and we got families all across the state that use a specific program to get their good adjusted, and we did our middle A advocacy event. In the end, will it benefit my family? Maybe, but that was the function. Let's talk about school for a minute. The big thing, school down in sort of the big areas, and I do this. This is how it's funded. This is how the money comes in from the government. So first of three is that first steps thing that we call first steps in Missouri, early intervention. That's when we got a diagnosis. We had therapists come to our house. And that was, a good kind of space for us to be exposed in. What we found out that the rest of wasn't coming to our house, including our family and things like that. They never knew about disability. They didn't see my Lily as, everything, these are all the things she can do, and these are going to help. It's not all she couldn't, but wasn't going to be able to. There was some in Italy, if you will, from all that work. It was hard, and it was something that we were well, we figured out. Whatever we saw, just got thrown off the bed. Once they hit three, once Lily was good, technically, all their services go to the local school district. So we did a 3K in elementary school in a public school system. And we had a therapist there, a specialist. We had to tell everyone, all, from ages 3 to, let's call it 12, high school. Lily was constantly in a position where we had some idea that she was allowed to be in this class, this biology class, where they were studying big rocks, even if she couldn't fill out the plan or express appropriately her knowledge. And to build the family needs, right? For like our close family, our parents, they finally come up and talk during the babies. They got certain ways they do things, and my dog's fine. But you know what? When you reach that age, you get that gift, right? You can say and do whatever you want, even if it's not exactly appropriate. but we did find for the family, brothers and sisters, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to do it. So instead of stepping up, asking, how maybe people, that was fine. But it opened the door for new friends. It opened the door for new opportunities, new places to see, and for us to focus on Lily's experience in the school system. So middle school, high school, the biggest piece for us in middle school and high school, because cognitively Lily is 100% there, but functionally, she needs school assistance. She's assistance to eat, use the restroom, and mobile life to roll herself around. So she gives the appearance of having anything. So from age up to, Lily's got that big smile, right? Pictures, we have the social media pictures, right? They're smiling. That's one of the pictures. It's not always that way. The sauce strategy that goes into getting the smile. But until Lily was like 12, 13, everybody was with her. She could win anyone. As a therapist, or relative, or someone on the street, her smile, giggle, and she didn't matter whether they treated her like a 5-year-old or whether they patted her on the head, or they just talked at her and didn't hit you. And anybody like that, she'd be like, all right, you don't think I'm in there? Fine, I'm not in. The teenage I turned it off. Everybody was going to do something for her anyway. And for the next 2 or 3 years after graduating middle school, nobody else, we struggled with it. I mean, she made it a goal in her IEP that, hey, Lily needs to functionally engage up. So she got to be friends with her. We don't even say she got to be nice to everybody. She can't ignore everybody assuming they're going to treat her like a because there's nothing there. This is her own more than being treated like a little kid. And so by the time she was about 15 or 16, she has an augmented communication, like she has 9-day slowly and some switches. And a lot of her work at school was social. It was social interactions on the page. And she would look up, give them an eye, give them a link, give them a greeting. And that was a really important step for us because it represented something to my wife and I and to Lily, where her community is good. And that's for the rest of the topic here. You're going to hear me say the word community a lot. That's the most important thing. Most important thing is to not just have a community, but to always harness and develop. To this day, my daughter knows more people in St. Louis, Missouri, and elsewhere than whether she's out with me, my wife, going for sport people. Someone's going to say, well, she might have met at school, she might have met at social programs, she might have met therapists, in the hospital, something very memorable, and that is where her safety lies. So as we hit this end phase, 12 to 18, which then converts into 18 to 21, because hopefully you all know, if you have an IEP, you're in the public school system, you're entitled, no matter what your district tells you, to be educated until at least the age of 21. Some states even go to 22, which you can still receive services. And Lily stayed and replaced until that day. But what we started to understand was that last transition, that transition to adulthood, but that was big. We realized by the time we started middle school, you got to start thinking that. You got to start thinking about what Lily's life is going to be like when she turns 18 or 21 or after the school months stops. So I mentioned before Marcus policy. This is not because I believe it all should be like one of us. I took this class to Harvest Policy. There's one in every state. It started in Minnesota. And I was in the class when Lily was early on, right? So maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I still thought that I was in Italy. Let's just say that. It was still that, oh my gosh, these are all the things you can't do. She's not going to be able to have a house. Oh my God. You saw that she had. She's not going to be able to have a job. She's not, all the things she's not. So I think this class teaches you for free all the history of disability, housing, education, how to advocate for local and state and federal level. But there are some advocates in this class, right? And those women, they share. And she was a big power chair. And on the back of the chair, it said, my name is Sharon. I'm 24 years old. Don't talk to me like the I'm a baby. And I'm like, it's kind of fun. So Sharon had a story of walking. And I've been used for it. And I never knew that their utterances were actual women. And I remember speaking, I didn't realize those things. I don't know if people are talking to her. And I'm like, oh my God, amazing. She's actually saying things that other people understand. So I wanted to understand it. So I sat with her at lunch, the very first class. And over the course of the next little while, became used to her communication. And we became friends. And we kept talking for that class, along with all the other things that the wonderful instructors. And Sharon taught the key has the same hopes and dreams as anybody else does. And made me realize that so does my dog. And instead of worrying about it, I was starting to embrace power. And that's exactly on this path. So now we're in school. Lily's continuing to school. I've turned from here's all the things she can't do to the things she can do. And we realize that she's getting to the upper years that we need to transition, start to think about what her transition is and how people are going to be affected by these transitions. So if you're everybody, you just take lunch. Let's have a little activity. If you can, if your children, you stand up. Okay? If you're under 5, stand up. Under 13, okay, 2 more. Under 18, almost the rest. Under 21, oh, that's what I said. You guys have all stood up for your figuratively stood up for your loved one. That's why you're here. That's the most important thing to do. When you're in school, everybody thinks it's all about this. It's all about therapy and what I can do and all that stuff. But it should become pretty evident pretty quick. The most important thing is what you're going to do with the next transition, right? And the next transition is for adulthood. So how are you going to prepare for adulthood? And I tell people, and maybe some magic words that I already said and things like that. You should always be working on your next transition. For Lily, when we were in high school, or as we were getting into school, Lily started to volunteer at a preschool. Actually, at the people in a summer preschool, they said, "There's a real problem now." And of course, it was Lily and he or my wife, sometimes one of the person's parent as we go. And she started to help that will be on the cell or to get out extra setting again. And at preschool, 2-year-old experiences like that. She loved. Okay, so now we're in school going, oh, I know the family she's got. Could she do this for a couple? Yeah. But there was a preschool in the high school, which we had never heard of. It was from teachers and other sort of people in the area. But we got ability, again, see, got ability to be the first student that I to push in, volunteer with their parent at the time to that school. And for 10 grade years, maybe an hour or two for grade years, a couple hours a day. We were establishing what the bandwidth was for her, what's the different things she could do, how she could work on different therapies while in that program. We were trying to envision what a piece of Lily's the high school life would look. How would we consider filling our for the IEP world, and I'm sure you guys are well experts on the IEP. I'm going to jump to that conclusion, but I want to give you some magic words if you're still in the middle or find yourself struggling and you want to get attention. And the magic words come from the legal stuff, right, that schools know about, and an aspect of public schools know about. So it doesn't mostly apply to public schools. We're you mentioned a little bit collaborated in the email. I'm not too clear about that if you want to talk about next year's classes. And because school districts are supposed to collaborate with parents and all parties at all times. They're not allowed to say, just in this, soft skills class, but it's the best place for it. It's not into that. Appropriate. Take down from the word appropriate public education, Kate, which is magic, IEP roads, kind of stuff. But if you use the word appropriate in an email or in the conversation, assuming you have reached the person who sort of knows what these words mean, you don't have to say anything further. It's basically you saying, okay, stop. It's just using the word appropriate. Presume competence I already told you about. Skill development, we are huge, and for Lily, it was huge. This is skill development. Right? It was a gateway to helping Lily and helping the school figure out what she's going to do later on. You can put on skill development, almost anything you want. But it's a way to make sure services continue because until she's met the skill, she's going to have to keep working on it. And then the other one's inclusion. Our family, so it's very, 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 and we're in inclusion because, well, a lot of reasons, but we're into inclusion because we believe and we have learned that the safest place for Lily is around people who aren't paid to know to be with her community and inclusion at school, that she's going to be around her typical peers, which then she's going to make friends who she potentially could know her more. And she did, and she took the dogs. The other big thing we run into, I had this discussion with people about sort of how to work out school and where to justify things in school is I get caught in the, well, it's really smart. They just, need some social skill development. Don't know because I'm not as familiar at all with your families and things like that. I've been here now, see a bunch of kids running around. You guys are not. You got all different levels of ability. You've got a big wide spectrum. Everybody show hands, show words. People see Big Bang Theory, right? He is a fictional character. 99.9% of the people like Sheldon Cooper are living in their parents' basement because they didn't develop the social skills to get on with a roommate or have a job or get around town or things like that. And that's no joke. So the to inclusion and connections and how to use that school era, your loved ones need to develop a strategy, a group of skills, understand their limits. You as their guardians, caregivers, parents, whatever role you're playing, need to understand what those levels are, because there is no special in the adult world. This is it. This is the last practice is in a school or a school structure setting. And that transition to adulthood that's going to take place when the school bus stops to be either at 18 or 21. Once it happens, there's no going back. You can't go back and get on the bus again. It is a finite thing, and we all hope that right and lead that our loved ones are going to have a much longer life as they head into this school. So I encourage everyone to do that. You want to include, at the end of your IEP structures, as you start to get into the later years, you want to make sure you reach out to your regional centers that have Medicaid structures and waivers and providers and secondary school options and anything that you're thinking about going forward with after school. Let that come to these meetings early on to help inform you and your team. I can tell you one of the biggest things that happens before we're out of school for us was we started to use carriers. We started to be exposed to having people come to our house and beyond the babysitting. Sales little, we had worked full time, I still had to shoot at it. Then we had dating for a little while, and then that was over, and then finally we decided we were going to bring someone after school to help Lily. She did as much as Sam did, if not more, and that exposed us to the world of characters. So, okay, let me stop pausing. We got like sort of questions or more pieces. I'm gonna have more time at the end to bring stops that you guys would like. Wait, what? Look, the biggest piece I'm on anything. Okay. So everybody here is probably already familiar with your eye, right? So I come up with this analogy that compares to 21 IEP world to everything else. And everything else is what's the individualized support. So if you're going to receive government benefits, if you are going to try to get a Medicaid waiver, you got to deal with the ISP. The ISP world succeeded in a nice cafeteria. Whether you love it right now or not, it's still a nice cafeteria. Like there's a whole selection of stuff. You got what you want. At the end of the day, you put it in the track or something things it up for you. You can stay. I'm going to start next year. I'm going to start this. Try this. Okay, you might have to kick your stream a little bit, but it's all there. It's all there in the middle. The adult world is like a really lousy drive. You got to know exactly what you're interested in before you even pull up to the box. You got to be super clear, and then when you get to it, you can double check your bag, make sure it's in there, and if you start to like 1.5 turn of the wheel, and you're like, oh, back to the envelope. Sorry. And I want to make that really clear to everybody that it is a flip, because again, there is no special education in the adult world. You need to know the game. You need to understand what world you're working, whether the medical stuff you're probably starting to get pretty good at, right? Starting to understand sort of doctor speak and how they work and maybe insurance stuff. Those cool stuff. Whatever you master, that's great. But it's not applicable in the adult. Government programs, stuff to deal. Medicaid's different from state to state, similar principles, Social Security, legal things, financial things, community, private, family-based things. These are all things that you need to understand the rules and the way the game is played for each other. And the same applies in the adult world as hopefully you're exhibiting in the kids' world right now, which is if it ain't right, it didn't happen. All the adult one stuff you can break down into, I would recommend breaking down into maybe. I mean, you got your school stuff, and school, legal, financial, family, community, and then all the adult stuff I break down into three subgroups. And then financial, which is where you're going to get where your loved one is going to get the money. Maybe they work, maybe they have enough income, maybe they're going to get SSI, maybe there's family. But that might be money to be an adult in America. So that financial is one side. Second side is housing. And the interesting part about housing is it's not just the money in place. It's also acknowledging what level of care your loved one needs to be in that setting, which is an honest assessment of how much you're doing that. And that's how it is for us. That was a really big aha moment. We were fine having a few people here and there to help out like that. But when we finally realized that it's unless we have someone support for Lily and we start, we didn't want someone there first thing in the morning. It's on us. No, there's someone there first thing in the morning super helpful. Lily can do her thing and we can get going and do our thing. Just work or allegations and things like that. But what level of support that housing is high level support. The last level is transportation. And it's as important as the other two. Because you could have maybe a volunteer space for a dock, and you could have a great place to live. But if your loved one's life revolves around you, get in the car, talk to places, that's not sustainable. So there needs to be work on what transportation is going to look like when you're not able to do it. This stuff will start back in school, recognize it, but especially in the adult world. All right, let's take a peek real quick. And I'm not going to go too deep into this stuff. Do hours of each of these skills that I have. I wanted to make sure I hit, sort of the high. So the biggest thing is, you get us under 18. Actually, you can qualify for Medicaid, but the real benefits come with quick. Show of hands, who has Medicaid? Anybody have Medicaid here? Okay. Anybody have waivers here? Okay. So you're familiar with the waiver system. Those who are not, there's two parts of Medicaid. There's the health insurance side of Medicaid. Has value. Not as good as my insurance, but it has value. And then there's the waiver side of this. We did the single largest government benefit dollar for dollar that will be available to you because of personal care and residential options that the waivers are. But as you start doing 18 and you're coming out of this IEP 504 program, you guys are making some decisions, and these are all big decisions. Because the world sees your loved one at 18 as an adult. Here, are you know that whether you apply for Social Security? I think you guys are doing a charting life stay here or did one already. Is that right? Sorry. I'm going to chart life course. That is a tool used. But how do you consider working with different providers, wills, specialties, trusts, choosing attorneys, things like that? These are all super personal things. But I can tell you, we did it early on. We have specialties trusts. We didn't fund it. And it's probably the best way to go through those early years, because if you start applying for these government programs, if you have a specialist trust and it's funded, you're probably going to add at least another 30 to 40% of time to that processing, because they're all going to want to see it. They're all going to want to know where it came from. They're all going to want to make sure you're not, hanging money from them. So when I tell families the way we did it, it's so simple. We just didn't fund it. And then just like 4 or 5 years ago when my father-in-law passed away. My mother-in-law decided, hey, I want to give some more resources to Lily than to anybody else. And we went back to a different tax structure, a different attorney. Actually, same attorney that did Lily's program, but a different, with different questions and said, hey, this is what we want to get at. There's tax implications, there's things like that. And we actually set up a whole different trust because from a tax standpoint, it was better to do that. And now it is fun. It always form six. So we're not applying for anything. The special needs trust pieces, 18 photos. But using an attorney, getting that legal piece, that legal bucket is something that you're going to need to make sure is identified. That word I think I will leave you with all of this is it transferable? And what it looks like to be transferable. So it's one thing that all set up, but what we struggle with, what happens when we can't do it? Right? Is what we're going to do. Well, for next year, I mean, our family decided early on we were not going to make it Liz Mother's Day safe. We were not going to put any expectations on Sam. Sam, we wanted Sam to give his best luck. And he said, oh, I put his name on anything. He came up with other names to put on, all of the legal documents and to continue on with financials. It takes 22. And we, recently had discussion was that who's doing this? And that's given him a lot of angst, not knowing. So we finally had those discussions now. But for you all to start thinking about anything that you're setting up legally or financially, how that's going to look when you're not here, how it's going to be transferable. If you're going to set up on the financial side, let's say loved one's getting Social Security, and then who's going to be the rep payee? You're the rep payee now. Who's going to be the rep payee? What's the trigger for all of that? How is that all going to work? I call the financial section sort of the different bags of cash, right? Of course, there's always personal reasons, but FSI goes through the best, right? And that is the only way to get the 18th birthday, pay account. It can increase. They can only $2,000. You all know that. If there's anything else you can see, get it out now. Not 18 if you want to buy presents. Well, you retire or your spouse, they then your loved one will get a loan. They'll get roughly an additional 50% of whatever you're going to get added to their paycheck, and they get moved into a different system that doesn't have the $2,000 has that stuff like that. For Social Security and stuff like that, do it on law. Get this like if you don't have my SSA account set up, set one of them. Set one of your loved ones. They're super hard to get in touch with. Once you get through to an officer at SSA, you're all very good. You will get as much information at the very beginning of any of those phone calls. Have it any Next, I can ask from the state levels Medicaid, different state. That's where the case manager comes in. In Missouri, we have state plan services, which is in-home services. The billboards, grandma, you can get paid to take care of grandma. That's state fund services. Beaver services, through the Department of Health, it's a Medicaid program. There's a big dollars. That's self-directed or provider based. We use self-directed. We can pay our employees that work for Lilly. That's formally at $30 an hour. It's funded through Lily's Medicaid. There's a few different types of areas. County law cash. Missouri has what we call SB 44, which is pretty tense. That shows that benefits people with intellectual development disabilities. There's a variety of funding there, and then of course we have all sorts of private insurance, Medicare. Fun fact: if you take retirement, your Social Security, and your loved one is on SSI, 24 months from the date they start getting that payment, they get Medicare. full day. We're in that world now. We're about 60. We're trying to decide, what Lily's insurance is going to be later on. We've got good private insurance and Medicaid, so that's good primary, secondary. There's a lot on my wife's job for primary insurance. Other thing, and I know there's a few in Missouri and some other states here. If you have Medicaid and you have private insurance, your level is on both. Check and see if there's a private insurance payment program in your state of Missouri. So, health insurance premium payment program, where your local one is on a private insurance policy as a primary, and Medicaid is their secondary. State of Missouri will pay your premiums for your entire costs. Just another sort of add up piece to all that. Housing and transportation, all of these are the same size. All of these, those buckets are the same size. There's a reason for that. It's because one doesn't operate without you. And having your loved one with a community around them based on is going to involve all three of those pieces: finance, housing, and transportation. I want to encourage all of us to start living transportation way. My daughter's got a van, and she can only use one. She uses a wheelchair, she can only run a van. There's groups. And we owned it, and she's paid now. If there's a caregiver, they have access to vans, so people who drive it, they can train to that. You have to understand that your loved one's health and safety and vitality in their years, what they've done with school, starts now. And you all need to understand how important these types of things are as you're setting it up and getting in the day-to-day. Talk with a lot of things really down in the weeds on, but this time you keep it equally and or a state. We're fighting Social Security for 5 months and we're never going to get, and what I try to explain, working the money, that's not what we're doing. Our part is what you got to do. And how are you going to create a life for your love after you're not able to do it? And so this is my wife and I have not spent more than 4 days with my daughter at the time. On a couple long weekends, things like that. For 30th anniversary, I said, like 8 or 9 months in, like, I want to go back to Hawaii. That's where we're like. She's like, well, okay, that's cute. So do I. So what? Right? So it was a big alignment for us and our family. We had some caregivers that had, and we used students. So health care students, several of them had commuted, lived in town, got married. We had the right mix of people at the right time. My wife and I took a 9-day trip to Hawaii last November. It took 80 different caregivers. It took me 4 months to plan it out, just to make sure I could go to the hotel. And then bills had to go back and sell my white home. So they go, we can't do this. We can't do this. The biggest part was me forcing me to put it right for her. Right on our space, which is not allowed to like go to the bed and I ended up Hawaii. Right? We don't volcano blows up. We don't come home. What does it what happened? I would put that there. Right. What are all the passwords? Who's taking over this at this point? Who are going to ask to come? Where's the resources coming from? What is, our intent for everyone who's not us if we're not here? It was hard. You have to make phone calls. There's a residential facility in St. Louis here that is actually now, this is out of Jefferson County, not an hour south of St. Louis. Not the only place that really would be able to go residential. And I know the director from Opinsky. I called Andrea, like, it's gonna be a weird discussion, just give me a heads up. But here's what we're doing. I said, Larry, did that. So it was on that list, give them my name and. But we did get on this plane and make it go there. He actually sitting down and doing it with voice and us sort of going through all those pieces. Sleep. And I think that's what this comes down to. Is all the stuff that I'm spewing at you and maybe you're some of the stuff, maybe this is stuff you think about every day and night. Actually taking an action, doing something on paper, understanding what the bits and pieces are of your community, the community you're building around your loved one is what's important. And it is what's going to help see the business. I'm really happy. I'm not about this. I'm happy to answer any question about anything that I brought up or things that are different. Any questions?
Good folks. Huh? Oh. Question. She's actually, if you don't have a strong community or want to be with family or friends, what's something that she can do to create community?
I think that you build without anything there.
So because she has a fear of what would happen to her son if she's not there, but since she doesn't have a real strong community or whatever, that's what makes you worrying.
Understand it. And the reason, how old's your son?
So
this is the time to start to harvest. It can't persist. You have to. So if your existing community is something that the religious communities tend to be very friendly. I don't know if you're connected to any type of religious community. I like local, even just senior centers and or young kids getting involved in volunteering to develop the community. I work with a lot of people that's just flat out social, and that's fine. I mean, everybody's their own thing. You have a loved one with a high level of need. You got to break that off. You have to force yourself on social. Even if it's just little things, go to a park that you trust that you like. So people you are. Start to try to create connections that are beyond the behaved world for your loved one's being. That's where it gets dangerous. And looking for paid for your kid, that's what the hard thing.
Well, yeah, she said that she feels that her big struggle is because her son is not verbal, so it's hard for her to trust people because he can't really communicate what's really happening. And so, and so she doesn't really have a lot of people to watch him. So the building community is challenging. So do you have any suggestions on how to navigate that? Since her son is not verbal, building the trust.
People
In Illinois.
in Illinois, start with your local community college. Go over there, talk to an OT, talk to the OT or PT or speech program, and say, hey, you're looking for a mom that doesn't help her to be just somebody else, a student that everyone has some resources to to pay to be with them or maybe to help you and start to build in a friendly area, maybe not the most close to you. My daughter does the same one. My daughter, she'll blink for yes, she'll look away for no, she'll cry if something's physically in pain. Created a community around so that we can sleep exactly the same. You will not be able to, at 18, 21, 24, you will not be able to persist and continue on. You're going to get burnt out. So you need to start finding a little tiny morsel of that and start with the younger professionals in the healthcare. Start reach out because they're there because they care and they don't know about your family yet. So now that's the perfect time to do an introduction. They're young, you're young. What other questions or ideas or issues? Yes, ma'am.
Have you from your empowering ability? They actually found something. A lot of things you say are similar. And I know one of the things about building a community was is that we're in a situation where we're all we ask for help. So if you can think of ways that you can be helpful, and that's another good way to get to know. But I don't know, do you have an opinion on that? Do you have any experience with it?
Current abilities. It's a nice organization. I mean, I think again, it's kind of like the money side, right? You know, you can get it for money. You can agree with the money.
Yeah.
So it's great to have the information. But I love that spirit of okay, what can you do? So that's where we were at with Lily and the preschool thing, right? It was like that, like just kind of have to call, right? You know, that person can have the preschool and whatever else. And they go to the preschool. And when, you know, an extra set of hands at any preschool, we appreciate it. So that was sort of the thought on that. But the community piece is, I mean, that's the core. It's all people that know Lily that is your city. Yes. Not necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, I just want to ask how did Lily feel about when you went to Hawaii? When you went to Hawaii.
Oh my gosh, it does. Yeah, I mean, these are all women of her age, right? So these are some of the caregivers were ones that have become retired, which means they're physical therapists, occupational therapists or something in the community. And we've been to their weddings and things like that. She had the time of her life. They did everything she wanted. She was on her best behavior. She slept well, which could be a thing. They had girls, every night these girls like, you know, never had issue, whatever. So, and she represented to us that she wanted us to have, which was beautiful, right? That let us go really enjoy it because she communicated with us that she wanted us to go, as opposed to, oh, don't go, you know, that wasn't it. It was a huge go, please do.
So I think being here is a big one. Being here with this community and learning from parents here. Because I get most of my information from other parents. It isn't necessarily the dominant. I have such a short amount of time to take and spend time in the Zoom. Or just getting involved, like you said, with different activities wherever your child is. But I learned so much from it. I learned with my son Luke. The things he's able to do is, you know, he's 22. I'm amazed. When I look back at when he was, you know, 4, I was like, where is he going to be in life? And I never would have pictured this. And I am so happy where he's at. I still struggle with what the future is going to hold. And I prefer myself, and I wanted to ask you about this. We are his advocates and we're still around. But how do we help Luke become his best advocate? Because he's going to be in situations where he needs to do that. And we're just trying to help him have a voice.
That's a great question. When I help So I'm a disability addict. I'm led to that. I think families bring me in and whatever else to help them. And what the very first thing, whenever I have a very initial meeting with families, I always want to meet with their loved one that we're talking about, that they want me to talk about, because their voice is as important, if not more. And when I say voice, I don't mean verbalization. Every expression, every behavior, every vocalization is communication. And honoring their ability to make choices and come up and create strategies that help keep them safe. So I mentioned I, right? Lily every day has a variety of choices. The only choices, sort of, for the most part, she is able to control, which are simple two choices. Every morning she gets to choose what she eats for breakfast. She gets to choose what she eats for lunch. That's two choices. She gets to choose what she's going to do for the day from a small list on an IB device. These are things that she controls and chooses to communicate in her own. You have to basically take the tools that your loved one has, come up with a strategy to give them whatever level of voice, choice, or control that you can. From a safety standpoint, that's why you're trying, right? That's why you're the guardians. And I've gotten into heated discussions with families that are like, well, I'm going to take my rights away from my kid. I'm not going to be a guardian. Da, da, da. And I'm like, okay, well, what if the next caregiver comes in and they love that caregiver and they say, hey, Johnny, you sign this and help me get my car? And you're like, yeah, of course I love you, you know? And now Johnny's on the hook for a mortgage and you haven't seen, you know, a car, a car loan, and you haven't seen the caregiver in 3 weeks. On job, you know, that's an extreme example. A practical example of where to draw limits and understand how to keep things in. I have a dear friend of mine, St. Louis, we have the University of Missouri St. Louis as a succeed program, specifically for young adults with developmental disabilities. It's a 2-year program meant to help foster independence. And the dog was participating in it. She has relatively low needs. They had a fair, right? How long away? Do you need me to stop?
Okay.
Okay. Just give me the no. They had a fair setup with tables and stuff, and the dog had gone on the tables, whatever, and done something, and not told the parents back at the house. Right? 3 weeks later, parents in the mail get addressed to the daughter, thing from the St. Louis Cryogenic Center. Open it up. Like, thank you for your lifetime membership to the St. Louis Cryogenic Center. And they're like, so they get on the phone, and she's like, oh yeah, they were at my school. I think it was great. I did it. Well, where did you get the money? Oh, grandma had just given me a birthday check. Right? And the family would have share any sort of structures or whatever. And yeah, actually the entire was $1,000. And so of course parents follow the academic centers, they did the whole thing. That's a relatively easy example. That's what we're talking about. We talk about being treated like an adult and knowing sort of where the lanes are that are firm and where you're able to honor any possible level of communication that they can so that they can live a meaningful life.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much for this information. We had gotten some of this from other sources over the years. But yeah, we run into lots of people who obviously have never heard any of this. So I'm super grateful that you're here. And also I was delighted to hear that it's a good thing to not on the trust, but we have trust not on it. And I have always kind of wondered, is that the right decision? You know, should I put something in there yet? Our daughter is turned 16, so,
You don't have to.
yeah.
Look, again, not financial value, whatever, but if you don't have to, guess what I mean, right? If you don't have to, keep it as simple and unfunded as you can, if you get past that those funding lead-offs, the social security, right?
Because the whole point really of the trust is to make it look like they don't have any money so that you can get the most from Social Security.
Not much, that you could qualify at all.
Yeah.
They're only allowed that $2,000 to their aid,
Right.
to qualify for it. So yes, that's the function of the, well, everybody's trust fund has different reasons. Exactly.
I saw something that I had never seen before on one of your slides. I think it was called ABL. Yeah. Can you maybe talk about what that is? Because I've never heard that.
I'm sorry.
Which is an ABL.
Oh, an Able account. You never heard of an Able account? So Able was it was on the financial one. An Able account. Every state, it's set it up maybe 8 or 9 years ago. It was a federal thing that they passed. And it basically is an account that you can put money into. Up to $15,000-16,000 a year that is protected from Social Security and Medicaid benefits. Sort of lives there for free. And different states have different. The state of Missouri is the most you can have in it at any given time is I think $100,000, and the most you can have it in over its lifetime in aggregate is like $800,000 or something like that. The cool part about it is it does fit your loved one's financial needs. It's a credit. You put the money into it, they can use it, spend it, whatever they need to, and it has absolutely no effect on anything else. Social Security and Medicaid, well, absolutely, it's entirely good. It is not a wealth transfer system. If once the money's in there, they use whatever the money is, and there's an end of life situation. That money goes. First thing is the Medicaid law. Medicaid's allowed to go and say, oh, we take out this much, we're going to take this much out, and anything that remains even after that gets distributed to whatever the state level donation thing is. It's not meant to transfer wealth like a trust specific. The rough kind of rule of thumb I give people is if you're talking about assets less than that you want your loved one to have available to them, between $150,000 to $200,000, this is a great way to. From $200,000 up to maybe $100, and I'm talking lifetime. Aggregate lifetime, not one, but aggregate lifetime. Probably needs some type of trust, but there's public trusts that each state has, and there's some private sort of things that works similar to Able accounts, and not meant to be wealth transfer devices, but you don't have to have a big giant attorney, and it doesn't cost thousands of dollars to set up paperwork and filing. None of that. It's handled sort of. You get on the north side of $1 million and up over the lifetime, you really, really need to sit with a tax specialist to set it up, because there's a variety of different things that can be done depending on what you want to do with it. Because at that level, most people expect that, oh, well, I think it's being pressed. Those guys special needs trust. It's going to get fun. Joyce and I are, it's going to get a lot of it, right? And then when Lily is no longer living, I want that to go sick. I want to stand back, right? I don't want it to disappear. I want it to go back and pick up where they want to help. And I want whatever we managed to save and put aside to go to my kids. And that's a spirit point. That helpful? Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it.
we want to audio people, we want to add a couple things that I was thinking of and I want to say. So advocates are available, most states have